Welcome to the Truth Over Comfort show. Today I will again be doing a video on media censorship. I previously did a video on the ex-Secretary of State under Obama, John Kerry, being caught in a leaked audio saying that the US watched ISIS grow, thought they could manage it and use it as leverage at the negotiation table against President Assad of the Syrian regime. He then said that Vladimir Putin and Russia came into the Syrian conflict because they didn't want to see a Daesh government, an ISIS government. The New York Times reported on this leaked audio, but did not mention that segment once. They also don't provide the full audio. They just provide snippets, and they even use parts just before and just after, but don't mention that. CNN and The Guardian also reported on this leaked audio, who both also didn't mention this. So you have American news networks and British, both didn't. And then CNN even posted the full audio and took it down later, which was interesting. And no other media organizations other than alternative media reported on the leaked audio at all. No France 24, no Australian media, no Canadian, no Sky News, no BBC, no whoever. They just didn't report it. And I left that up to you to decide, was that self-censorship? Was that the network or editors saying no? Or, just most journalists and networks know not to go too far because they'll lose access. That's up to you. Today's one is great because it's straight from the horse's mouth of Amy Robach from ABC, which is owned by the Disney Corporation. She is caught herself in a leaked audio from one of the cameramen or producers in the room speaking about Jeffrey Epstein. And she does say how this story was squashed by the network. So she says that she had the story on Epstein 3 years before it came out. She had Virginia Roberts sit down with her, made her come out of hiding after years, and they had Clinton, they had Prince Andrew, they had all these powerful people. But the ABC said, who's Jeffrey Epstein? Who's Jeffrey Epstein? It would take one search result if they didn't know, which I'm sure they probably did know who he is, and it would come up because he was previously arrested, obviously in the late 2000s, and really implicated with people like Prince Andrew. So that's nonsense. She then goes on to say how one of the reasons the network squashed it was because they didn't want to disrupt their interview with Prince William and Kate. So right there, there's access. And she talks about how the palace put pressure on them when they found out about the story. So what's more interesting? Some interview with Prince William and Kate, or one of the biggest stories of the 21st century, that royalty and all these powerful people are, hanging around with Jeffrey Epstein and much more involved than we thought. They chose to go with the celebrityism type story and didn't want to lose their access, which seems like it's one of the number one reasons these organizations probably don't touch certain stories, is because they want access to presidents, prime ministers, heads of corporations, banks, whatever it may be. So it was interesting to hear her actually say it was squashed, and I'm going to let you hear it yourself now.
I've had the story for 3 years. I've had this interview with Virginia Roberts. We would not put it on the air. First of all, I was told, who's Jeffrey Epstein? No one knows who that is. This is a stupid story. Then the palace found out that we had her whole allegations about Prince Andrew and threatened us a million different ways. We were so afraid we wouldn't be able to interview Kate and Will that also quashed the story. And then Alan Dershowitz was also implicated in it because of the planes. She told me everything. She had pictures. She had everything. She was in hiding for 12 years. We convinced her to come out. We convinced her to talk to us. It was unbelievable what we had. Clinton, we had everything. I tried for 3 years to get it on, to no avail, and now it's all coming out, and it's like these new revelations, and I freaking had all of it. I'm so pissed right now. Like, every day I get more and more pissed because I'm just like, Oh my God, it was what we had was unreal. Other women backing it up. Hey, yep. Brad Edwards, the attorney, 3 years ago, saying there will come a day when we will realize Jeffrey Epstein was the most prolific pedophile this country has ever known. I had it all 3 years ago.
She's calling out that they had all these people, that the network squashed it. They said, who's Jeffrey Epstein? They didn't want to upset the palace after the palace found out, which is interesting. How did they find out? Someone obviously tipped them off. I'm not sure whether it was in the network or not. They didn't want to upset them and lose their access to the interview with Prince William and Kate, because again, that's more important than all the victims of these people. And they chose to protect the establishment, to do an interview with the establishment rather than all the victims. The one critique of people say of Amy Robach is, one, obviously she has to be caught in a leaked audio to say this, and two, she kind of seems like she cares more that she wasn't the one to break the story. We had the story, we had everything. I'm so pissed right now because I could have, she could have been the one to expose it. You could say she could still be upset about obviously the victims and she's annoyed she wasn't the one to break it for them, or you could say it's more of just a careerist thing because she exposed massive power. But seems like that isn't the careerist thing to do, because these networks don't like the big stories that upset the networks. So in my previous video, it was maybe to self-censorship. This one, she's actually been asked not to do it. And obviously she's very annoyed about that. She then goes on to talk about in pretty frank terms, because again, she doesn't realize anyone's recording. And this is through Project Veritas, who get people to send in, recordings like this, or they actually go undercover themselves and try and get the people to admit it themselves. But she obviously goes on to say that, when she found out the news that Jeffrey Epstein was dead from a suicide, she knew straight away that he had killed himself. That he'd been killed. She fully believes that, and that, the lawyers previously on that previous suicide attempt, he was roughed up by an inmate, was to plant the seed, according to Amy Robach.
Do I think he was killed? 100%. Yes, I do. Because he made his whole living blackmailing people. Yeah. There were a lot of men in those planes, a lot of men who visited that island, a lot of powerful men who came into that apartment. When I heard he was found dead, I knew immediately. And they made it seem as though he made that suicide attempt 2 weeks earlier, but his lawyers claimed that he was roughed up by his cellmate around the neck. That was all to plant the seed, and then that's why I really believe it. Really believe it.
The last of the leaked tape has Robach talking about alleged Epstein conspirator Ghislane Maxwell and how she should be very careful.
He's got to have left evidence in the unexplained. Well, Ghislane Maxwell, who I had all sorts of stuff on her too. I love it. I'm it's so funny to hear everyone say her name now, because I'm oh my God, I had all the, and everyone was who's that? Who cares? I kept getting that. Who cares? She knows everything. She should be careful. Well, she was his, she went out and recruited all of these girls. Stand by. She should watch her back. Because if she goes, I'd have security guards all around me.
The brave insider who leaked this tape to us does not know who at ABC News spiked the story, but someone at ABC does. Our question: who killed the Epstein story at ABC News and why?
Again, that's an establishment, anchor on a, massive network in America who believes that Jeffrey Epstein was killed. I wonder how many more also think that, but I have to do, the in quote marks, Jeffrey Epstein commit suicide. Yeah, he committed suicide. But it was in the quote marks because, it's a bit tongue in cheek because they, it probably was killed and it's just one big joke. Everyone sort of knows, but you don't have to say it because everyone knows. And then she also, goes on to say Ghislane Maxwell should watch her back because she knows through the interviews with Virginia Roberts and other girls backing up, according to her, again in that first clip, that she was, his right-hand man, helped him recruit, and she knows everything about these powerful people too. So if she was hurt, she'd get, all these bodyguards because, she's got a target on her back at that time. Obviously now she is in prison and no one else was implicated in, these sex trafficking charges. But I won't go on too long because the story kind of speaks for itself. There's nothing too much more to say. She actually says it for you. Whereas the first, the first video I did with John Kerry, you have to kind of speculate to why they didn't, cover the leaked audio at all, or when they did, they just didn't mention the biggest story possible. But this one, she says in her own words, it was squashed. The network didn't want to know about it. The palace put pressure on them, and they didn't want to mess up their access and probably future access, much like other networks. And of course, Project Veritas mentions in the whole video, which I will put in the show notes, that Disney still, sorry, keep saying Disney, ABC still haven't released the interview with Virginia Roberts. And they say, who are they protecting? It's a good question. Who are they protecting? We always hear the same names: Bill Clinton, Prince Andrew. Some people probably don't even know about Bill Gates. Where's the rest? Who else is implicated? People might know about Les Wexner and other people, but there must be so many more names on there. And it's kind of annoying she didn't, mention it there either. She did mention the same names. So I'm going to leave it there and leave you to, ponder on the fact that they actually squashed one of the biggest stories ever for access, or that's, the reason she thinks it is. Maybe they got a call and said, yeah, there's too many people implicating this. You're done. Who knows? I'll leave it up to you. Thanks for listening to The Truth Over Comfort Show.